Give it up for Dan Gavin from Big.
Hey.
Nobody writes the docs, so I made Claude do it.
Exactly. So we were sitting around our office one day, Claude came out with Claude Skills, and we started thinking about, okay, how can we use this internally to make a product for ourselves, but also learn something at the same time? So we looked at the docs of when we write our code and what we present to our clients afterwards. We typically ship a product with someone, sorry, the cursor's there. We typically ship a product, and then what comes afterwards is we offer them documentation, right? How do I do this? How do I, create a new post? How do I do these kinds of tasks that I can pass on to my teammates? So this was a great opportunity to just say, hey, let's make Claude do something for us that we can actually, build upon for ourselves, for our internal teams, and then also pass along to our clients that come in a package, right? So with that, we decided to do that. So real quick, this is me, because I'm sure most of you don't know who I am. So I'm a digital experience engineer. I work at BigCom. We're here locally in Birmingham. So we kind of have a great little motto here, right? We challenge, we disrupt, we deliver big time. We have another one that I didn't feel like it was appropriate to throw up on this big screen for the first time, but that's kind of the way we go. We are problem solvers. That's how we look at everything. And we just really wanted to approach every project we have with a client, a potential partnership with you, as a new problem and how we're going to attack it that way. We never look at two things the same way. We don't just copy paste, here you go. So that's kind of the vibe we kind of go with at the agency there. So kind of back to this, right? So what if the docs wrote themselves, right? So we can take a look at this and just say, what if it's a byproduct of everything I've been putting my time, energy, clients' money into, and I can say, hey, we need to put this together, package it up in a logical way for myself, for my teammates that maybe need to look at the code afterwards and kind of familiarize themselves, because there might be a time where we all feel like we're stuck in the situation where we're writing code ourselves. We pass it along to someone, it gets shipped, and then we kind of forget about it for a while, and we have to relearn what we even wrote about a month later. So that's kind of where we came up with this. So we needed to look at it from two different lenses, or at least that's how I felt when I first started thinking about this. We needed to have docs for the public-facing people, right? We need those guides. We need task-oriented things that they can see with screenshots, video walkthroughs. How do I do, like I said earlier, how do I post this? How do I edit a post? How do I change this? How do I update any content on my site that my team can pull up a site, understand what's going on? They don't feel like they're tethered to having to talk to someone at an agency or email someone in the middle of the day, wait another day to hear back from them. And then beyond that, we have the private side, right? So I write code, I write code, every day, all day. And when it comes to having to pass that along, sure, it lives in GitHub and we have READMEs, we have whatever system your team implements, with your comments and things like that. But we kind of needed something a little bit more robust to kind of help handle some of the projects we work on. You might look at massive scale WordPress sites that you're doing things on. You might be running things on Node that is just primarily code and pure front end push out, right? So we needed a way to look at code examples, integration docs, and then annotated component trees. How does this flow in a really quick picture to understand what I'm looking at and what we're working with? So that's where this comes in. So we wrote a skill called Vite Docs. It's got kind of like branched out different methods you can use. I didn't want to look at this as a one-shot, let me just fire off this skill and it does everything for you immediately. It kind of needed these breakpoints to kind of help you understand, okay, what am I getting into next? What step should I go to next? And how are we going to attack it? And also, I want to come back later. I might not want to burn my entire session just doing this one thing, figuring it out. So we have a couple different options that you can run through. So init, that just asks you a question. You might be starting the project to begin with. It tells you kind of where to go. Setup, that's where it starts to look at what you have. It starts putting in things like VitePress, which is what kind of went the name Vite Docs. If you haven't used VitePress, it's static build, markdown based files. So every page on your site is just a markdown file that gets parsed into HTML with their template. And then we use GitHub Actions and Pages deployment. So in GitHub, for us, it just made a little bit more sense to lean on them a little bit to host our site or our documents. So we move on to generate. Generate, well, that reads your entire code base, detects everything, stack, writes the documentation, and gets everything going for you out of the gate. You basically just let that run for 5 minutes and you're kind of ready to roll. Beyond that, we have brand. I'm going to move over here because we're going to move into some examples in a second. So we have brand and capture. Brand just lets you design your VPress page if you want to, colors, templates and things like that. Beyond that, we have capture. So this is where the fun, like, I need to show my client something and I need to show my developer something on how it works. So capture will run through based on a manifest that's generated during the generate portion, and it'll look at all of your code, all of your documentation tasks, and it'll say, oh, right here is a great opportunity for a screenshot of what I'm actually talking about, or a video that can play in the background and give annotations based on that. So you'll see things like Playwright listed out there that opens up a Chrome browser in the background for you. You don't even have to do anything, runs the browser for you, follows along. You can give it a little more direction if you need to. Also important to note when it does capture, if you have things like login screens, you can provide login credentials for it. However, it does not store any of that data in the skill or in your documentation when it ships that to push that through for the capture. It's a one-time use, so it just basically pushes it in the browser and deletes it from its own memory. And then you have things like sync, super important, right? You build all these docs, a week later, you write more code, you have more code in the code base. You need to run sync. You need to run that. It'll go through a manifest file again that's produced through generate. It'll look and see when the last time things were captured, and it'll look at git diff, and it'll look at just even markdown file differences if you've gone into your own markdown files and written your own changes or updates to these documents. And then it just runs a full sync on everything, gives you an output of what it thinks it needs to update based on what it sees, and you kind of give it the go. And then we have an update for when I push new things and fun ideas to it, so you can kind of just re-update our command. So a couple quick examples. I think I've got some time here. So again, it kind of plays both sides, and it'll ask you up front, okay, are we building public? Are we building private? Or are we building both at the same time? Do you want it in X folder or Y folder? So it kind of sets all those things up. So one of the things I did was obviously I had it generate its own documentation, so I knew what I was doing afterwards, and I can pass it off to Robert, who I work with, and he can look at it and go, cool, now I know how to use it. I don't have to sit there and have a conversation. We can kind of have this happen in real time for him in his own time, if you will. So it just sets up a VDoc site. I'm sure most people have seen code bases out there that just kind of have their own documentation websites. But the cool thing is it builds all of this so fast for you. It has built-in search. So you can just sit here and look for, API. If you have API endpoint integration, it'll kick you right over to there. So we have custom kind of like blocks, I guess, if you will, that we've created to basically say, on top of the standard things that VPress does, we know we work with API endpoints. So we built this into it, and you can tether your own kind of concepts into your own skill. But basically, it'll scan your code base for API endpoints. It'll write the markdown, write the necessary endpoints you need, tokens you might be using, what might be returned in a sample return, and then whether it's get, post, authenticated, admin only, those kinds of things, which is pretty cool because it just kind of scans all that. And again, I don't have to sit there and go, ooh, I forgot about that endpoint. That's actually kind of a key pain point for us to actually pass along to someone. And I mentioned earlier, we have the manifest. So this is kind of like the meat. Think of like the Claude MD file. If you're using Claude Code a lot, it creates basically the same file. It'll look at that. It'll let you know kind of what's going on. You can browse it yourself and kind of basically say, hey, this is the pages it's setting up. Oh, I actually want to push some things around, when it was last synced, and those kinds of things. All right, so that's kind of the meta. I used our tool to make our own tool. But just to give you another example, so for the event, we built a couple different sites that you'll see random things for BigCom. Sorry, Ryan, I took your photo earlier, and here it is. So we're using a thermal camera today at one of the events if you're going to be at City Walk, so we can take your portrait with a thermal camera. We can give you a QR code. You'll be able to download a video of that thermal 3D card. So if I go into here, I'm going to use you as an example because you're in the crowd and I see you, provided the Wi-Fi works or my hotspot works. So it creates like a 3D card for you in browser. You can generate, the video on the fly. It'll download a, 1080 by 1920 portrait mode kind of video for you. You can post that wherever you want, have a good time with it. You can always come back to this site and check out all the other funny ones that we have. Well, I built this thing in like 2 days for us to just like concept this out, right? I kind of just siloed myself how to do it. I need to pass that knowledge on to Robert. So again, Robert, I work with Robert at Big, other developer. So again, perfect opportunity. Fire off docs as soon as I'm done running. Here's how our iOS app works that we actually had to tether to a very weird thermal camera that attaches to your phone that has no integration whatsoever, API access endpoints. So we basically built an app that runs alongside of that, that takes our photos, pushes them to that website you just saw, and there's knowledge base there that we need to know about. And then there's the web experience. We need to know about the knowledge base that goes there. So again, we have a guide. It tells us this is how everything's working. You know, we're using Supabase, all these kinds of things. And you'll notice when it writes these documents, it will never basically say, hey, if you're here, here's how we're kind of doing things with .exts. It does not pull in those secret codes or secret things you might be having. So again, like using the website, it just kind of goes through, pulled a screenshot for me when we had some earlier testing, just to give me an idea, hey, this is what it looks like. Here's your trading card. This is what this page means. This is where it renders. All those kinds of details come through in these. I don't know if the video is going to play. I'll just let it there, but you can kind of see, annotations that go directly alongside the video. So you don't have to sit there and watch a 30-second video. If you just want to quickly go through those annotations, you're good to go. And then on the development side, how do I run this thing? How do I set up my local setup to pick up where he left off or they left off? It gives you all the details you kind of need to make sure you have in place, where you need to be running them, and kind of how that goes. Lets you know what node versions were used on the project and things like that. And then how do we deploy? Hey, you need to do these things, set all this up. You need these 2 specific keys. Again, it knew the keys, but it does not know the values. So it just kind of passes that knowledge along to say, hey, I need to know where you store these and pick those up along the way. All right, how are we doing here? I am flying. All right. So it was just a really important thing for us to kind of look at and use this as a tool that really helped us internally, but just has a lot of legroom and to kind of grow and manifest, because I picked things that I felt comfortable with using. I mean, if you come along and you want to build your own skill that has this, you can pick what's working for your team. It doesn't have to be VPress. It doesn't have to go through GitHub. You can, generate these skills your own through Claude Code and kind of pick your own playbook of how you want this to roll. This just made a lot of sense for how our day-to-day flow works in our agency, and how we kind of pass things along. Because if we're passing off, a whole Git repo, this comes along with it. So we don't have to separate all this data and pass along a Microsoft, Word file with here's how to do everything. The last thing it might have been updated was 2 years ago. It's, we can hit sync, put it in Git, ready to go. So just a couple last little pieces, everything's in one place. You have code, documentation, video, screenshots, everything. It's always up to date with the sync. It's safe by default. There's no credentials. That was super important to us because, again, we don't need those leaking out there. And then we can pass those along if we need to separately in a more viable way. And then I didn't mention earlier, but it is stack agnostic for us. We kind of run the gamut on what we're building in. Again, like I said, we don't just sit there and go, oh, sorry, we're WordPress only or we're this only. We have our preferred methods, but we needed a way to kind of look at this and say, scan any kind of code documentation we can do, because like I said, one project to the next for us is wildly different. We don't approach it the same. And we're surely not going to push a CMS or a methodology on you every single time just because that makes us feel comfortable. So yeah, nobody, now Claude writes the docs for us, which is kind of cool. And then last but not least, just kind of leave it here. We'll be around at some of the other events. If you see me, just feel free to ask me any questions you might have. If you want, again, I promise it's not a sales pitch for our agency. If you want to just talk code or talk, ideas, anything with us, feel free to scan that QR code or come up and ask me. You can book 15 minutes with us, no strings attached. If you just want to talk about video games, doesn't matter. You can just book some time with us and hang out, and we can just chat. All right. Thank you.
Give it up, Dan.